All right. So this is my third time doing this. Hopefully it's recording. I'll really lose my mind if it's not. Okay. So I wanted to lead you through Palo's introduction. There's a lot of really great connections in here. And I discovered Palo on a vacation with my daughter in Lake George. And it was ironic, just last semester when I was teaching this for the third or fourth time with this book, I realized that a video I use in curriculum has the Ann Palo, who's wrote this book, as a teacher in an early childhood classroom. I'm like, I didn't even know it. So I feel like I was drawn to this book, but I already knew about her and I thought it was like this new thing I was doing. And it wasn't. So, okay. Palo. Ann Palo is an early childhood educator who then and I think I'll share that video because I think seeing her in action, how she does it, is just as kind of wondrous as seeing Paley at work doing things we're like, that's not gonna work. So this book starts off with our idea of what art is. And in my mind, if I think about my idea of art, a lot of time it's what's hanging on my wall, right? It's what it's that's what it's always been. And if it was art in my classroom, it was definitely an activity that the children explored, an art activity. When I was first teaching, it was definitely an activity that I was sending home. And so it was also one that was like one and done. Okay. So the book says that a common definition of art is static objects of products, paintings, sculptures, a musical score, a poem, a play, and it's finished, right? So it's a product. And I have to be honest, if I talk about art, at least at first, before I started teaching this course, I did think about paintings or sculptures, right? Not so much about a musical score book or a play or a poem, which I'm like, what was I thinking? Of course, that's art. Now, another definition of art from a teacher perspective could be a spontaneous, open-ended, messy exploration of color texture with little or no adult direction or involvement. Very open-ended. Another definition of art that I've seen teachers use is those craft activities that are very scripted. Children are given a model of what it's supposed to look like. And then if they don't make it look like that, it's wrong. That's not really art, that's craft. In fact, I have a colleague, she teaches high school. Some of you, I don't think anybody in here had Heather Tuttle, but she teaches college courses in high school for us. And she says it's not craft, it's crap. So we are going to go with something that's more like the first one, but maybe even a little bit bigger. So Palo's definition seems to be a lively process of engagement with a range of materials, an engagement that is sensual, reflective, creative, and deliberate, relational, and expressive. I know, right? But I think this also makes me think of Paley, whose definition of the art of story would be much more complex than when she's talking about it in terms of children. So, Via Vecchi is an art teacher from Reggio Emilia, Italy, and she worked with Loris Malaguzzi to create the first art studios in schools. And Palo definitely thinks that art should be, if possible, which is ideal, it should be approached in like a studio atmosphere. And we're going to learn about what on earth that might mean. Most of us teach in a classroom where there's not room for a studio. Um, but there could be if it was if there was an intention put for it. So Vecchi writes that art and aesthetics are like the way something looks, I believe, are located in the border zone between rational and imaginative, between cognitive and expressive, an attitude of care and attention for the things we do, a desire for meaning, and it is curiosity and wonder. It's the opposite of indifference and carelessness, of conformity of conformity, of absence, of participation and feeling. So Vecchi believes that art can be a way of thinking, feeling, imagining, relating, and expressing. Art can be a way of being in the world. So when I was looking at that, because that's a lot, that makes it Palo's definition look pretty easy. So I didn't, that was pretty hard the way I read that. I think it could change the meaning, right? So it's an attitude of care and attention for the things we do, a desire for meaning. It is curiosity and wonder. It's the opposite of indifference and carelessness. It's the opposite of conformity. It's the opposite. It's the absence of participation and feeling. So it's the opposite of those things. And so when I was thinking about that, because I never used to think about like when I go inside my house and I make it my home and how I decorate it, I didn't think about that as art, but it really is. And when I do my yard work in the back and I create the garden and the place where I feel like the most peace, that's also like my own canvas, right? Many of us feel more at peace when the canvas of our kitchen is in order, the way we feel like our home is supposed to feel. That's our own personal canvas. And I think that's kind of the idea of what we want to get across. So when you start thinking I'm not creative, this definition means we're all creative. We just have to broaden our definition. So what does this mean for teachers? Well, just what I just said. We don't have to be masters of technique. We have to participate in the world alongside children with minds, hearts, and bodies present and engaged. And that really reminds me of Paley in those first chapters where she says to the student teachers, I want you, well, actually, I think they said it to Paley, her master teacher said, I want you to put yourself in the children's roles in their try to get into what they're trying to do at play. Try to play like children play. And so it calls on us not to stand apart while children are painting or play, exploring, but to be there, present and engaged, expanding their language, maybe trying it ourselves, but not perfectly. Um, just being present to guide and support children through the language of art as they do these explorations. So with young children, we teachers look closely, pay attention to detail, notice what we notice, ask questions, pose challenges, and take new perspectives. We explore our emotions, examine our thinking, communicate, and listen. So one of the outcomes for this course is to have you as a future teacher, as a possible future educator of teachers, many of you are already teachers in the field, think about yourself and your creative identity. And many of us, including me, had not really thought about that before nurturing creativity or Ann Palo or even Vivian Paley, right? So we can only meet children as much as we've met ourselves. So we don't want to, if it's sometimes this course really creates a lot of anxiety for people because they're like, I'm not artistic, I can't do this, I can't draw, I can't do this, I can't do that. Well, think about if you're the one guiding children and you're like, well, I can't do that, but you can. Like that's not, they're pretty smart. They're pretty savvy. So if you want children to take risks, it means we have to take risks too. And then we have to be okay when we maybe don't do it as well as we would have liked. We have to still see the beauty that's there or acknowledge what is there, what we put into it, and what our sometimes it's our intention. I think sometimes we're going to see how emotion and feeling is connected in the work, the explorations that we will lead. So this is the thing I see a lot more and more in academic books about early childhood, and it has to do with joy. Teachers must find joy in the play of our senses. And a lot of art, especially in early childhood, a lot of explorations are very sensory oriented. They're tactile. You're gonna gotta feel them, you gotta touch them, you might taste them, maybe not the art. We don't need anybody eating glue here. But find the joy in the play. So if children are like seeing that you don't want to get paint on you or you don't want to touch oobleck or whatever, then why should they? We kind of give children whatever hangups we have about it. So that's what Palo means when she says to join them. Okay. So explore and become comfortable with a variety of media. And this is something I see a lot of people struggle with because we have, like, some of us think we're not mathematicians, we can't do math. A lot of us think we're not creative because at some point in our education, our art, whatever, which was probably a craft, did not look like the teacher's craft, or it didn't live up to something that was in our mind. Art isn't supposed to be right or wrong, right? It's supposed to be kind of representative of a moment. Just like with Paley's not looking for them to write the next Nobel Prize winner. She's looking to empower them as authors of their own stories. And when we do that, they are able to go further than we can even imagine. So beyond we're going to explore a different, variety of media. We're going to learn what Palo means about the language of art. What words do teachers use, or could they use to even expand a children's exploration or experience with different media? And then one of my favorite words I learned a few years ago now is we provide provocations, and through our questions, through the materials we provide, the opportunities we create in our environment. And I always used to think of a provocation as like I'm um, irritating someone, I'm provoking them. And we are provoking children to find joy or to explore something, take a risk, but it's not a negative thing. So it's kind of interesting. So, okay, children and art. Children use the language of art to construct meaning and understanding. So, just kind of like when children act out or pretend play, they're working out, what are the rules of society? What does this mean that my mother has a new baby? What does it mean that there's good guys and bad guys? Well, what if I don't want there to be a lot of bad guys? Maybe I'll make them, um, you know, go away. Or maybe I don't want to just see Cinderella from the perspective of her nasty sisters. I want to see Cinderella when she was a baby and had a loving mother. And so we see children kind of working through the questions and concerns they have through the TV shows, through the different things in their family lives, through things we hear about in the news that somehow they are exposed to, whether right or wrong. And so they start to work out, like, what are the rules? Like, what if somebody's being mean? What if I didn't follow a rule? I love that chapter in Paley where the kid took a puzzle piece out of the area, and then they lost it, and he's all worried about getting in trouble. And so he makes this whole story about it, and then everybody else makes their story about it, and it becomes this really creative thing. And then the teacher realizes the deal and just helps them piece. And it's like, oh, that's a solution. We didn't need to worry about that. So children through art and these risk-taking moments begin to develop their identity and sense of self. And when you have a strong sense of self and identity, you're more likely to have a positive self-esteem. So when children are speaking the language of art, they are producers rather than consumers of knowledge. That idea that the teacher is supposed to, like, give all their knowledge to the child. Actually, this is a two-way street. And we teachers can learn from children, and children can learn from us, and we can learn with them. And so instead of imparting some kind of knowledge, we can learn together. We might know something that'll help them, but it's not about just doing what we tell them to do based on something we've imparted to them. And then this really is interesting. I mean, it's complex language, right? So Palo writes, when children are speaking the language of art, they are producers rather than consumers of knowledge, a generativity that allows children their full dignity. And this, I think, reminds me of how much we can limit children because we think we gotta have rules. We're afraid that things are gonna get too out of control. Limit the glue. We don't want to waste any glue. We don't want to, I mean, there's things we have to do to keep children safe, but there's also things where let children, kind of lead their path and explore things, test things out, figure it out. It's going to be a much more meaningful experience for them. And this dignity that it's talking about, I think when we underestimate or we diminish what children are able to do, we really don't give them the respect as learning human beings that they should be able to be considered. And it's a strange, and it just kind of reminds me of when I read when I'm teaching infant and toddlers, and it something out of NACI said that I should get down with the infant and tell them, well, ask them or warn them that it's going to be their turn soon. I'm going to change their diaper. Is it okay with them if I change their diaper? They're going next. And that was kind of blew my mind because when I was a toddler teacher, I don't think I did that. I think we looked in their at their butts and we're like, "Oh, you smell." And we like, no choice. It was like a assembly line, get them up, get them done because we want to all go outside. And I don't know. I doubt with my own kids that I asked them either. Honestly, it was like, got like stuff to do. And just something as simple. Of course, I wouldn't want someone to not ask me and to assume that we don't need to. I think it shows like, even if they don't get it at first, getting in the practice of asking them if we can change their diaper, or if they're ready, giving them an opportunity. That shows how we want to be treated, that we have to ask for consent. I'm not talking about all consent, but you know what I mean. We got to role model those things. And I think with art, telling them what they have to do with the art, it's okay to give different provocations through different materials, but then telling them what it should be and what it should look like really isn't respectful of their own creative beings. And we need to think about that. All right. So, Palo also believes that studio explorations and art-based inquiry is essential, and we'll learn more about the studio in the next chapter. She writes that young children's unique and necessary contributions to adult understandings of the working of the world, of the complexities of human relationships, of ethics, of the essential role of story in our lives, of the dynamics of the beyond human world, these contributions must not be squandered in the name of assessment. And this is in a section in the introduction where Palo's really talking about how our kindergartens and pre-Ks and first grades are just being taken over by standardized assessments, and that time for actual explorations with the arts is so limited. Um, and this reminds me of Paley again when she's saying, her approach to literacy does take time and it does take intention. And it doesn't find a lot of value in these standardized tests, because we're not empowering children to be authors in their own lives. We're saying, up 89% of you got it higher than you. You know what I mean? That's not really what I want for my child. And it's just something that schools tend to have to rely on in order to get funding. So, all right. So I'm going to stop here and stop the recording and then start it again just so that it's not going to be so long. Thank you. Stop sharing.